You know, people love to romanticize long-term travel, and sometimes I wonder if they are right in doing so. Because if you would look at my history, you would think I'm in like a witness protection program or something. I used to have this terrible habit of doing life-altering decisions based entirely on my restlessness. Ever since I was a kid, I was stuck in this loop. I land in a country, make friends, build a life, and then like a clockwork, vanish again. I was counting it recently. There was a 10-year stretch when I haven't slept in the same bed for longer than 2 months. My one best skill was to know how to keep starting over. Turns out, that's a terrible way to live. Who would have guessed? I realized I was just skimming through countries and not actually living in one. I was done with that. I wanted to actually know a place. So I decided to drop the anchor in the Philippines. But how did a place where I knew 0 people finally stop the 20-year-old habit of running? Let's talk. When being on the road is the only baseline you've known since you were a little kid, sitting still feels like being on fire. But when I turned 18, I actually tried to fix that. I really did. I went back to Europe, bouncing between Czechia, Germany and England, determined to finally do what normal adults do. And on paper, life was great. Comfortable, easy and stable. People around me were building real, grounded lives, and they were genuinely happy doing it. They were doing it effortlessly, like they actually belonged. But for me, it felt like trying to breathe underwater. And I fully realized that the problem was me, not my surroundings. This wasn't some romantic free spirit phase or a rebellious stand against authority. I'm not that deep. I just physically couldn't acclimate to a system like that anymore. The harder I pushed, the more unhinged I felt. Before long, packing my 3 shirts and going back on the road was the only logical exit left. So I took it. But did it fix the problem? Well, it felt like it for a long time. I spent years moving from place to place, living out of a backpack and convincing myself I was winning at life. The problem with never putting down roots though, is that your life becomes a ghost town of past chapters. Move every few months for such a long time and you stop building anything real. You collect hundreds of contacts in your phone you'll never message again, and an entire years blur together into a haze of airport gates and short-term rentals. I got jaded, the excitement evaporated, replaced by this eerie sense of detachment, like I was watching my own life through a bus window instead of actually living it. I've spent most of those years bouncing between Latin America and Southeast Asia. What I didn't realize back then was that my time in those regions was secretly preparing me for one specific country that shares the DNA of both. When I finally accepted that it was time to stop running, I hit a wall. Where do you actually put down roots where everywhere feels temporary? I threw a few classic options on the board, places like Vietnam or Belize, but I simply couldn't decide. The Philippines wasn't even a consideration at first. For years, I actively avoided it because every seasoned traveler I met had a warning. Bad infrastructure, safety concerns, complicated logistics. I'd made my lazy assumptions and believed them. It's amazing how confident you can be about a place you never set foot in. Travel culture is full of know-it-alls, passing around bad advice about the place they spent 6 days in 5 years ago. I fell right into the trap, writing off an entire nation based on a hostel bar gossip. What actually broke this bias was the people. Everywhere I worked in the world, I kept running into Filipinos. Spending time with them, I noticed level of adaptability and warmth that didn't match the bad reviews. So I finally did my own research beyond the tourist headlines, and that's when the light bulb went off. I would spend decades bouncing across the globe, completely blind to one country that turned out to contain aspects of all of my favorite places. And even though I didn't know anyone there, and my other choices were much safer, for whatever reason, I couldn't get it out of my head. So I stopped thinking and took the leap. When I finally arrived, I made a conscious choice to stop playing the distance game. I realized that traveling 10,000 kilometers to spend 2 months in a country is just a surface level noise. Depth is infinitely more interesting than distance. Going deep into one place, focusing on the details, culture, daily rhythms, and neighborhoods. All those nuances you completely miss when you are just passing through. That's where life actually starts feeling real again. Now, depth isn't always a postcard moments either. It's making peace with the daily friction, the chaos, the heat, and the minor headaches, and realizing you would still rather deal with those than go back to running. And the beauty of doing that here is that the Philippines doesn't run out of complexity. You could spend 3 lifetimes navigating these islands and still barely scratch the surface. Every region feels like a different universe with its own feeling, history, and landscapes. You can cross the sea channel and land in a place with completely different language, a different pace, and totally different way of living. It gave me the stability I needed while keeping a built-in loophole for my curiosity. I didn't have to give up on exploring. I just learned how to do it without consistently throwing my life into trash and starting over. And it was the shift I desperately needed. Because for over 2 decades, I had this fundamental misunderstanding of what freedom actually was. I used to think that autonomy meant keeping an exit strategy in my back pocket, that choosing one spot was just a comfortable form of surrender. I had it completely backwards. Real freedom isn't the ability to bolt the second things get quiet. It's finding an environment where you actually want to be when the dust settles. I spent 2/3 of my life treating the world like a temporary holding room for a story I kept postponing. But sitting here today, I'm not eyeing the departure board or waiting for the next phase. I'm learning the names of the people on my street, watching the season change in one place, and letting things matter. For the first time in my life, I'm just showing up for the life right in front of me. And don't get me wrong, that old instinct to run doesn't just vanish overnight. 20 years of muscle memory doesn't magically evaporate because you had an epiphany on an island. There are still mornings where I wake up, feel that restless itch, and hear a quiet voice telling me to pack up my 3 shirts and move on. The difference now is that I don't buy into it anymore. I've realized that which isn't a sign that I am in the wrong place. It's just a ghost of an old habit trying to convince me that starting over is easier than sticking around. The truth is, the real story only begins after the novelty dies. It begins when you stay long enough to navigate the mess, the noise, and the ordinary Tuesdays, and realize you still don't want to be anywhere else.